In the shadows of Blackwood Manor, a young servant girl named Isadora finds herself drawn to Sebastian, the heir to the estate. Amidst dark family secrets, a sinister plot, and a dangerous rival, their forbidden love blossoms against all odds. Join us on this emotional journey of romance and redemption set in a world of rigid social barriers. But before we start this story, comment below from where you are watching us. The Blackwood Manor stood tall against the morning sky, its faded grandeur a reminder of better days gone by. Inside, the hallways that once echoed with laughter and music now held only whispers and secrets. Isadora moved quietly through the servants' corridor, her simple grey dress hanging loosely on her thin frame. At 23, her face still held a youthful beauty that she tried to hide beneath downcast eyes and a tight bun that pulled her dark hair away from her face. She carried a silver tray with Clara's morning tea, her hand steady despite her racing heart. Every morning was the same. Every morning she dreaded. Every morning she endured. She knocked softly on the bedroom door. "Enter," came the cold voice from within. Isadora pushed open the heavy door and stepped into Clara's bedroom. The room was lavish compared to the rest of the declining estate: silk curtains, imported rugs, and a massive four-poster bed where Clara sat propped against satin pillows. "You're late," Clara said, not looking up from the book in her lap. "I'm sorry, Miss Clara," Isadora replied, her voice barely above a whisper. The kitchen fire was slow to start this morning. Clara finally looked up, her blue eyes narrowing. "Excuses are for the weak, Isadora. Perhaps another day added to your service would teach you punctuality." Isadora's stomach tightened. 5 years she had been working to pay off her father's debt to the Blackwood family. 5 years of service that somehow kept growing longer instead of shorter. "That won't be necessary, Miss Clara. It won't happen again." Clara smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Of course it won't. Now, help me dress. The blue gown today. Sebastian's mother is visiting, and I must look my best." At the mention of Sebastian's name, Isadora felt her cheeks grow warm. She busied herself with pouring the tea to hide her reaction. Sebastian Blackwood was the only son of the family, 27 years old, and unlike his father in every way. Where Lord Blackwood was harsh and demanding, Sebastian was thoughtful and kind. Where the father saw servants as property, the son saw them as people. As Isadora helped Clara out of her nightgown, she kept her eyes fixed on the floor. Clara's engagement to Sebastian had been announced 3 months ago, a business arrangement more than a lovey match. The Blackwood estate was failing and Clara's family had money. It was as simple as that. "You know," Clara said as Isadora laced her corset, "Sebastian asked about you yesterday." Isadora's fingers froze. "Me, miss?" "Yes. Curious, isn't it? He wanted to know how long you've been with us." Clara turned her head slightly. "What have you been doing to catch my fiancé's attention, Isadora?" "Nothing, miss. I swear it." Isadora's heart pounded against her ribs. Clara laughed softly. "See that it stays that way, is that. Remember your place in this house." She paused. "Pull tighter. I want my waist smaller today." Isadora pulled the laces until Clara gasped, then tied them securely. As she reached for the blue gown laid out on the bed, the bedroom door opened without a knock. Sebastian stood in the doorway, tall and handsome in his riding clothes. His dark hair was windblown, and his face was flushed from the morning air. "Good morning, Clara," he said. Then his eyes shifted to Isadora. "Good morning." Isadora kept her head bowed. "Good morning, sir." Clara's voice cut through the air. "Sebastian, darling, I'm not dressed. It's hardly proper for you to barge in." Sebastian's gaze lingered on Isadora for a moment longer before returning to Clara. "Forgive me. I just wanted to let you know my mother's carriage has been delayed. She won't arrive until this afternoon then." "You could have sent a servant with that message," Clara replied, irritation clear in her voice. Sebastian smiled slightly. "I could have, yes." He nodded to them both. "I'll leave you to your dressing." As he turned to go, his eyes met Isadora's for the briefest moment. In that second, something passed between them, something unspoken but powerful. Then he was gone, closing the door behind him. "Finish dressing me," Clara snapped, her mood darkened by the interaction. Isadora picked up the blue gown with trembling hands. Later that day, Isadora scrubbed the kitchen floors, her back aching from hours bent over the cold stone. The cook, Mrs. Winters, worked nearby, preparing dinner for the family. "You look tired, girl," Mrs. Winters said, glancing over at Isadora. "Did that woman have you redoing her hair again?" Isadora nodded, dipping her brush back into the bucket of soapy water. 3 times. She said it wasn't right. Mrs. Winters snorted. "Nothing's ever right for that one. Don't know what Mr. Sebastian sees in her, except her father's money, of course." "It's not our place to question the family," Isadora said softly, though she'd wondered the same thing many times. "Maybe not, but I've been here 30 years, since before Sebastian was born. I changed his diapers and dried his tears when he fell. I know that boy, and he's not happy." Mrs. Winters lowered her voice. "Lord Blackwood is desperate. The estate is drowning in debt. That's the only reason for this match." Isadora scrubbed harder at a stubborn spot on the floor, saying nothing. She'd heard the whispers among the servants. The once great Blackwood family was on the brink of ruin. Lord Blackwood gambled and lost, borrowed and lost more. Only Sebastian's marriage to Clara could save them now. The kitchen door swung open, and Sebastian himself walked in. Isadora quickly lowered her head, focusing on her scrubbing. "Mrs. Winters," he said warmly, "whatever you're cooking smells wonderful." The cook beamed at him. "Just a simple roast for tonight, Mr. Sebastian, nothing special." "Everything you make is special," he replied. Then his eyes fell on Isadora. "Hello, Isadora." Surprised to hear him say her name, she looked up. "Sir." "I've seen you around the house for years, but I don't think we've ever properly spoken," he said, taking a step closer. "You're about my age, aren't you?" "I'm 23, sir," she answered, uncomfortable with his attention. "And how long have you been with us now?" Mrs. Winters busied herself with the roast, pretending not to listen. 5 years, sir." Sebastian frowned. 5 years? To pay off your father's debt? That seems excessive." Isadora looked down again. "The debt grows sometimes, sir." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "I see. My father or Clara adds to it when they are displeased." She said nothing, which was answer enough. Sebastian's jaw tightened. "That's not right. Not right at all." He looked as if he wanted to say more, but just then Lord Blackwood's voice bellowed from the hallway. "Sebastian, where are you, boy?" "I have to go," Sebastian said, his voice low. "But we'll speak again, Isadora. I promise you that." As he left, Isadora stared after Achim, a strange feeling stirring in her chest. Hope, perhaps, or danger. Sometimes they felt the same. That evening, as Isadora helped Clara prepare for dinner, the tension between them was palpable. Clara had been in a foul mood all day, snapping at Isadora for every little thing. "You're unusually clumsy today," Clara said, as Isadora fastened a pearl necklace around her throat. "One might think you're distracted." "I'm sorry, miss," Isadora replied automatically. Clara turned to face her, eyes cold as ice. "My mother always said that servants who can't focus should be replaced." "Do you need to be replaced, Isadora?" Fear shot through Isadora's heart. Without this position, she would have no way to pay her debt. No home, no future. "No, miss. Please." Clara's lips curved into a smile. "That's what I thought." She reached out and touched Isadora's cheek, the gesture more threatening than affectionate. "You're quite pretty, you know. In a common sort of way. Is that why Sebastian notices you?" "He doesn't notice me, miss. Don't lie to me." Clara's hand moved from Isadora's cheek to her throat, not squeezing but resting there, a warning. "I see the way he looks at you, the way he finds excuses to be in the same room. Do you think I'm blind?" "No, miss. I mean, there's nothing." The bedroom door opened, and Sebastian entered, this time after a brief knock. He stopped short at the scene before him, Clara with her hand at Isadora's throat, Isadora's eyes wide with fear. "What's going on here?" he demanded. Clara dropped her hand and turned to him with a practiced smile. "Just a little lesson in proper service, darling. Nothing for you to worry about." Sebastian's eyes moved to Isadora. "Are you all right?" Before she could answer, Clara cut in. Why wouldn't she be? Really, Sebastian, you show an unusual interest in the help. It's unbecoming. Sebastian's face hardened. And your treatment of the staff is unbecoming of a future Blackwood. Clara's smile vanished. Careful, darling. Your family needs mine far more than I need yours. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, Sebastian spoke. Isadora, you may go. Clara and I need to speak privately. Isadora curtsied quickly and made for the door, but as she passed Sebastian, he whispered, Wait for me in the library after dinner. She hurried out, her heart racing, unsure if she'd heard him correctly or if she'd imagined it. And if she had heard correctly, was she brave enough or foolish enough to go? After dinner, Isadora found herself standing outside the library door, her hand raised to knock but frozen in midair. What was she doing? This could only lead to trouble if Clara found out. The door opened before she could knock and Sebastian stood there, looking surprised but pleased. You came. I wasn't sure you would. I shouldn't be here, sir, Isadora said, her voice trembling. Please come in. He stepped aside to let her pass. And when we're alone, could you call me Sebastian? Sir makes me feel like my father. Isadora entered the library cautiously. The room was warm, lit by a fire in the hearth and several oil lamps. Books lined the walls from floor to ceiling, more books than Isadora had ever seen in her life. Do you read, Isadora? Sebastian asked, closing the door. A little, she admitted. My mother taught me before she stopped, the memory still painful after all these years. Before she what? Sebastian prompted gently. Before she disappeared. Isadora hadn't meant to say it, but something about Sebastian made her want to trust him. She worked here, at Blackwood Manor. She was a lady's maid to your mother. Sebastian's eyes widened. I didn't know that. What happened to her? What happened to... Isadora shook her head. No one knows. One day she was here and the next she was gone. I was 16 when it happened. Your father offered me a position to help support my father, who was ill. Then after my father died, I discovered he owed a substantial debt to your family. I've been working to pay it off ever since. And yet the debt never seems to shrink, Sebastian said, anger flashing in his eyes. My father has much to answer for. He moved to a cabinet and pulled out 2 glasses and a decanter of amber liquid. Brandy? You look like you could use it. Isadora shook her head. I shouldn't. If anyone saw... No one will see. The family has retired for the night, and the servants won't disturb us here. He poured a small amount into a glass and handed it to her. Just a sip, for courage. She accepted the glass hesitantly and took a tiny sip. The liquid burned her throat, but the warmth that spread through her chest was not unpleasant. I've watched you for years, Sebastian said, leaning against his desk. Always quiet, always obedient, always keeping your eyes down, except when you think no one is looking. But I've seen your eyes, Isadora. They're full of intelligence and spirit. Isadora didn't know what to say. No one had ever spoken to her like this before. I need your help, Sebastian continued. Something isn't right in this house, and I believe it involves Clara. Have you noticed anything unusual? Letters, perhaps? Visitors when my father and I are away? Isadora hesitated. She had seen things. Clara meeting secretly with a man in the garden, letters hidden in her jewelry box. But was it her place to tell? You're afraid, Sebastian observed. I understand. But please know that I would never let any harm come to you. You have my word. Why do you care? Isadora asked, finally finding her voice. About me, about any of this. Sebastian took a step closer to her. Because I believe my family has wronged you. Because I cannot marry a woman I don't trust. Because every time our eyes meet, I feel... He stopped, seeming to realize he'd said too much. Isadora's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. Feel what? Before he could answer, they heard footsteps in the hallway. Outside. Sebastian quickly took the glass from Isadora's hand and placed it on the desk. You should go, he whispered. But meet me tomorrow, in the orchard at sunset. Please. Isadora nodded and slipped out through a side door just as the main door opened. From her hiding place in the shadows of the hallway, she heard Clara's voice. "Working late, darling? Or is the library just another place for you to hide from me?" Isadora didn't wait to hear Sebastian's reply. She hurried back to the servants' quarters, her mind racing with everything that had happened. Tomorrow at sunset, she would meet Sebastian in the orchard. And despite all the dangers, all the reasons she shouldn't go, she knew that she would, because for the first time in 5 years, someone at Blackwood Manor had looked at her and truly seen her. Not as a servant, not as a debt to be paid, but as a person. And that person was starting to hoppy again. The next morning, Isadora went about her duties with a distracted mind. When she entered Clara's room with the breakfast tray, she found her mistress already awake and writing a letter at her desk. Clara quickly covered the letter with a blank sheet of paper when Isadora entered. "Set it there," she ordered, gesturing to a small table. "Yes, miss." Isadora placed the tray down and began to open the curtains. "Leave those closed," Clara snapped. "Tea light hurts my eyes this morning." Isadora let the curtains fall back into place and turned to help Clara dress. As she did, she couldn't help but notice that Clara seemed nervous, her eyes darting to the half-hidden letter several times. "I'll be going into town today," Clara announced as Isadora brushed her hair. "I won't need you to accompany me." "Yes, miss. Shall I tell the coachman to prepare the carriage?" "No," Clara said quickly. "I've already arranged everything. You may go once you've finished here." Curiosity burned within Isadora. Clara never went to town alone. She always insisted on having Isadora carry her packages and attend to her needs. What was different about today? As Clara moved to her dressing table, Isadora caught a glimpse of the letter. A name jumped out at her. Davis. She recognized it. Michael Davis was a business rival of the Blackwood family, a man Lord Blackwood despised. "Is there anything else you need, miss?" Isadora asked, keeping her voice carefully neutral. Clara studied her face in the mirror, applying rouge to her cheeks. "Actually, yes. I need you to clean out my jewelry box today. Some of the pieces are tarnished." "Of course, miss." "And Isadora?" Clara turned to look at her directly. "Stay out of Sebastian's way today. He's been asking questions about you, and I don't like it." A chill ran down Isadora's spine. "Questions, miss? About your mother specifically, why she left so suddenly?" Clara's eyes narrowed. "Some stories are better left untold, don't you think?" Isadora felt as if the floor had dropped from beneath her feet. "My mother didn't leave, miss. She disappeared." "Is that what you believe?" Clara's laugh was cold. "How sweet. Now go. I have things to do." Isadora left the room with her head spinning. What did Clara know about her mother? And why was Sebastian asking questions? As she walked down the hallway, a hand reached out from an alcove and pulled her in. Sebastian stood there, his face serious. "I need to speak with you now," he whispered. "It can't wait until sunset." "What is it?" Isadora asked, her heart racing from his sudden appearance and the lingering shock of Clara's words. "I found something in my father's study last night. Letters about your mother." His eyes were intense, focused on hers. "Isadora, I don't think she disappeared. I think she was sent away. Or worse." "Worse?" Isadora's voice shook. "What do you mean?" Sebastian glanced down the hallway to make sure they were alone. "There's a part of the estate you've never seen. A hidden cellar beneath the east wing. My father keeps it locked, but I found the key." Isadora felt sick with dread. "What's in the cellar?" "I don't know yet, but tonight we're going to find out." He squeezed her hand. "Meet me in the library at midnight, not the orchard." "Can you do that?" Isadora knew she should say no. Every instinct told her she was stepping into danger, but the thought of finally learning the truth about her mother. "I'll be there," she promised. Sebastian's relief was visible. "Be careful today. Clara suspects something. I saw her watching us at dinner last night." "She's going to town today," Isadora told him. "Alone." Sebastian frowned. "That's unusual. Did she say why?" "No, but I saw a letter on her desk. It mentioned someone named Davis." "Michael Davis." Sebastian's face darkened. "My father's rival. This confirms my suspicions." He looked at Isadora with newfound urgency. "Check her jewelry box when you clean it. She may have hidden something there." A door slammed somewhere down the hall, making them both jump. "Go now," Sebastian whispered. "And remember, midnight in the library." Isadora nodded and slipped out of the alcove, her mind reeling with questions and fears. What had happened to her mother? What secrets lay hidden in the locked cellar? And most frightening of all, what would happen if Clara discovered what they were planning? The day stretched before her, filled with uncertainty and danger. But for the first time in years, she had something else too, a reason to fight back. Clara left for town shortly after noon, dressed in her finest blue dress and wearing more jewelry than a simple shopping trip would require. Isadora watched from an upstairs window as the carriage pulled away, her mind filled with questions about where Clara was really going and who she might be meeting. As soon as the carriage disappeared down the long driveway, Isadora hurried to Clara's room. She felt like a thief as she slipped inside, closing the door quietly behind her. The heavy curtains were still drawn, leaving the room in shadows. Isadora lit a small lamp and carried it to the dressing table where Clara's ornate jewelry box sat. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside, necklaces, bracelets, and rings glittered in the lamplight. Isadora began her task of cleaning each piece, but her eyes searched for anything unusual, anything that might be hidden among the treasures. It was while checking a false bottom in one of the drawers that she found it, a small packet of letters tied with a red ribbon. Isadora glanced nervously at the door before carefully untying the ribbon and opening the first letter. "My dearest Clara," it began, "our plan proceeds well. Sebastian suspects nothing, and his father is desperate enough to accept any terms we set. Once you are married, we can move forward. The estate will be ours to sell piece by piece. As for the girl, do not worry. She will meet the same fate as her mother if she becomes troublesome. Forever yours, Michael." Isadora's blood ran cold. The letter confirmed Sebastian's suspicions about Clara's connection to Michael Davis, but more frightening was the reference to her mother. What had they done to her? And what were they planning to do to Isadora? She quickly read through the other letters. They detailed a scheme between Clara and Michael Davis to gain control of the Blackwood estate through Clara's marriage to Sebastian. Once married, Clara would help Michael take over the family businesses, dismantling them for profit. Lo, R.D. Blackwood would be ruined, and Sebastian would be left with nothing. The final letter was dated just 2 days ago. "Meet me at the usual place tomorrow. We have much to discuss before the wedding. The servant girl is becoming a problem. Sebastian watches her too closely. We may need to act sooner than planned." Isadora's hands shook as she retied the ribbon and returned the letters to their hiding place. She needed to tell Sebastian immediately, but as she turned to leave, she froze. Footsteps were approaching in the hallway. Quickly, she blew out the lamp and moved to the corner of the room where the shadows were deepest. The door opened, and Lord Blackwood himself entered, followed by a man Isadora had never seen before. "We can speak freely here," Lord Blackwood said, his voice gruff. "Clara is in town, and the servants know better than to enter without permission." Isadora pressed herself against the wall, hardly daring to breathe. "The situation is worse than I thought," the stranger said. "Your debts have come due, and the banks are no longer willing to extend credit. If you don't make payment within the week, you'll lose everything." Lord Blackwood pounded his fist against the dressing table, making the jewelry box rattle. "Damn them! Don't they know who I am? The Blackwood name has stood for generations." "Names don't pay debts, old friend. Only M. does that. The wedding is in 3 weeks. Once Sebastian marries Clara, her father's money will solve everything." The stranger sighed. "If you can hold them off that long, there are rumors that Clara is not as committed to this marriage as you believe. People have seen her in town with Michael Davis." Lord Blackwood laughed harshly. "Impossible. She knows which side her bread is buttered on. The merger of our families will make her the lady of the finest estate in the county." "The finest crumbling estate," the stranger corrected. "And what of your son? Is he eager for this match?" A long silence followed. "Sebastian will do as he's told," Lord Blackwood finally said. "He has no choice. None of us do." The men moved toward the door, and Isadora held her breath. "What about the servant girl?" the stranger asked. "The one Sebastian has been watching?" Lord Blackwood stopped. What about her? She cooled complicate things. Young men can be foolish when it comes to pretty faces. She's nothing, Lord Blackwood spat. A debt slave just like her mother was. If she causes trouble, she'll disappear too. The door closed behind them, and Isadora slid down the wall to the floor, her legs too weak to support her. The truth was worse than she had imagined. Not only was Clara plotting against the Blackwoods with Michael Davis, but Lord Blackwood himself had been involved in her mother's disappearance. She had to find Sebastian. She had to warn him. The hours until midnight crawled by with agonizing slowness. Isadora went about her duties in a daze, jumping at every sound, afraid that somehow Clara or Lord Blackwood could read the truth on her face. When Mrs. Winters asked if she was feeling ill, Isadora claimed a headache, which wasn't far from the truth. Her head pounded with fear and confusion. Finally, the GR and father clock in the main hall struck 12. The house had grown quiet hours before, with the family retired to their rooms and most of the servants asleep in their quarters. Isadora slipped out of her small bed, careful not to wake the maid who shared her room. She pulled a shawl around her shoulders and made her way through the darkened hallways to the library. Sebastian was waiting for her, a single lamp burning low on his desk. His face looked grim in the dim light, but his eyes softened when he saw her. "You came," he said, relief evident in his voice. "I found something," Isadora whispered, closing the door behind her. "Letters in Clara's jewelry box. She's working with Michael Davis to take over your family's estate. They plan to sell it off piece by piece once she marries you." Sebastian's jaw tightened. "I suspected as much." "Did the letters mention anything about your mother?" Isadora nodded, her voice catching. "They said I would meet the same fate as her if I became troublesome. And I overheard your father talking later. He said my mother was a debt slave too, and that she disappeared." Tears filled her eyes. "Sebastian, I think they killed her." Sebastian crossed the room and took her hands in his. "We don't know that for certain, but we're going to find out. I have the key to the cellar." He picked up the lamp and led her to a door hidden behind a bookshelf. "This passage leads to the east wing. We can avoid the main hallways this way." The hidden corridor was narrow and dusty, clearly unused for years. Cobwebs brushed against their faces as they made their way through the darkness, the lamp casting long, eerie shadows on the walls. "My grandfather built these passages during the war," Sebastian explained in a hushed voice. "They connect all parts of the house. I used to play in them as a child, but my father forbade it after my mother died." "How did your mother die?" Isadora asked. Sebastian's face grew somber. "They said it was illness, but now I wonder. She died when I was 12, not long after she began asking questions about the estate's finances. My father changed after her death, became harder, colder." They reached the end of the passage, and Sebastian pushed open another hidden door that led into a storage room in the east wing. From there, they made their way down a narrow staircase to a heavy wooden door reinforced with iron. Sebastian pulled a large key from his pocket. "I found this in my father's study. It was hidden in a secret compartment in his desk." The key turned with difficulty, the lock protesting after years of disuse. The door swung open with a low creak that seemed to echo through the silent house. A damp, musty smell rushed up to meet them. Sebastian held the lamp higher, revealing stone steps descending into darkness. "Stay close to me," he said, taking Isadora's hand. The cellar was larger than Isadora had expected, stretching beneath a significant portion of the east wing. The air was cold and stale, as if the room had been sealed for years. Stone walls glistened with moisture, and the floor was packed earth. The lamplight revealed old furniture covered in sheets, crates, and trunks stacked against walls, and a collection of objects that appeared to be family heirlooms long forgotten. "What are we looking for?" Isadora whispered, her voice sounding strange in the cavernous space. "I'm not sure," Sebastian admitted, "but my father keeps this place locked for a reason." They moved deeper into the cellar, examining trunks and crates as they went. Most contained old clothing, books, or household items of little interest. But toward the back of the cellar, they found something unusual. A door set into the stone wall, smaller than the entrance door and secured with a padlock. "This is newer than the rest," Sebastian said, examining the door. "The wood isn't as old." He tried the key to the cellar in the padlock, but it didn't fit. Frustrated, he looked around for something to break the lock. "Wait," Isadora said, reaching into her hair. She pulled out a hairpin and bent to examine the padlock. "My mother taught me this. Sometimes the ladies she served would lock their jewelry boxes and lose the keys." After a few tense minutes of working the hairpin in the lock, they heard a satisfying click. The padlock fell open, and Sebastian removed it from the hasp. "Ready?" he asked, his hand on the door. Isadora nodded, though her heart was racing with fear of what they might find. The door opened to reveal a small room, more like a cell than a storage space. It contained a narrow cot, a chamber pot, and little else. On the wall, someone had scratched marks as if counting days. "Someone was kept prisoner here," Sebastian said, his voice tight with anger. Isadora moved to the cot and picked up something that lay half-hidden beneath the thin mattress, a locket on a broken chain. With trembling fingers, she opened it. Inside was a miniature portrait of a young woman who looked remarkably like Isadora herself. On the other side was a lock-key of dark hair tied with thread. "This was my mother's," Isadora whispered, tears streaming down her face. "She always wore it. It had a picture of me as a baby, but someone's replaced it with her own image." Sebastian put his arm around her shoulders. "This proves she was held here, but it doesn't tell us what happened to her." As they continued to search the small room, Sebastian found a leather-bound book wedged between the cot and the wall. It was a Joe Ernal, the pages filled with increasingly desperate entries. "Listen to this," he said, reading by the lamplight. "Day 43 of my imprisonment. Lord B threatens that I will never see my daughter again unless I sign the papers giving him control of the property my husband left me. I have refused, though I fear what this monster might do. If anyone finds this, please tell my Isadora that I love her and never abandoned her." Isadora covered her mouth to stifle a sob. "She didn't leave me. She was trying to protect me." Sebastian turned more pages. The entries stop abruptly about halfway through the journal. The last one says, "I heard them talking. They plan to move me tonight. I fear this may be my last chance to write. If I do not survive, let it be known that Lord Blackwood and his accomplice, Clara's father, are responsible. They have conspired to steal my land, which they discovered contains... What?" Isadora asked when Sebastian stopped reading. "That's all there is. The entry ends mid-sentence." Sebastian closed the journal and handed it to Isadora. "But this is evidence of a crime. My father imprisoned your mother to force her to sign over property. But what happened to her after that last entry? Where did they take her?" Before Sebastian could answer, they heard a sound that made their blood run cold, the cellar door at the top of the stair, as closing with a heavy thud, followed by the unmistakable sound of the lock turning. They were trapped. Sebastian raced up the stone steps, Isadora close behind him. He pushed against the door, but it wouldn't budge. "Who's there?" he called out. "Open this door immediately!" A cold laugh answered him. Clara's laugh. "I don't think I will, darling. You've been making quite a nuisance of yourself, asking questions better left unasked." "Clara, what are you doing?" Sebastian pounded on the door. "Securing my future," she replied. "You didn't really think I wanted to marry you, did you? Oh, your name is fine enough, but your estate is worthless. The only value lies in the land itself, land that will soon belong to me." "You're working with Michael Davis," Sebastian said through the door. "I know all about your scheme." Another laugh. "Not just Michael, darling. Your father too, though the old fool doesn't realize I plan to betray him just as he betrayed her mother." Her voice hardened. "He thought I didn't know about his little secret, about the fortune in minerals discovered on the Wilson property that should have been mine through my mother's family." Isadora gasped. "Wilson was my mother's name." "Very good," Clara said mockingly. "Yes, your mother refused to sell the worthless farm she inherited, not knowing what lay beneath it. When she discovered the truth, she became difficult, just as you have." "What did you do to her?" Isadora cried, pressing against the door. "Nothing that won't happen to you as well," Clara answered coldly. Enjoy your time together. The air won't last long down there. They heard her footsteps moving away from the door. Clara, wait, Sebastian shouted. You won't get away with this. But there was no response. She was gone. Sebastian turned to Isadora, his face pale in the lamplight. We have to find another way out. They searched the cellar frantically, checking every wall for hidden doors or air shafts. The lamp's flame was already burning lower, the air growing stale. There must be some way out, Sebastian said, refusing to give up. These old houses always have escape routes. Isadora stood in the center of the cellar, clutching her mother's locket and journal. Even if we don't find a way out, at least I know the Tia Uth now. She didn't abandon me. She tried to protect me. Sebastian came to her and took her hands in his. Don't talk like that. We're going to get out of here, I promise you. Why are you helping me? Isadora asked, searching his face in the dim light. You barely know me. Sebastian's eyes held hers. Because from the first moment I saw you, really saw you, I knew there was something between us, something I've never felt with anyone else. But I'm just a servant, she whispered. A debt slave. No, he said firmly. You're the daughter of Eleanor Wilson, and your mother was wronged by my family. That debt is ours to you, not yours to us. He touched her cheek gently. And you're the woman I've fallen in love with, against all reason and propriety. Isadora's heart pounded in her chest. Sebastian. But whatever she was about to say was interrupted by a sudden draft that made the lamp's flame flicker wildly. They both turned toward the source, a section of the wall where the draft seemed strongest. There! Sebastian moved quickly to the wall, running his hands over the stones. There's air coming through here. Together they pushed against different stones until one moved slightly. Sebastian pressed harder, and the stones slid inward, revealing a narrow passage beyond. It's an old smuggling tunnel, Sebastian said, excitement in his voice. This house was built during Prohibition. The original owner must have used these tunnels to move illegal spirits. The passage was barely wide enough for them to squeeze through one at a time. Sebastian went first, holding the lamp ahead of him with Isadora following close behind. The tunnel sloped upward slightly as they made their way forward, the air growing fresher. After what seemed like an eternity of crawling through the narrow space, they saw a faint light ahead. The tunnel ended at a rusted grate partially covered with vegetation. Sebastian pushed against it, and after several attempts it gave way, swinging outward on ancient hinges. They emerged into the cool night air, finding themselves in the orchard some distance from the house. The moon shone bright overhead, illuminating the rows of apple trees. We made it, Isadora said, breathing deeply. Sebastian helped her to her feet. But we're not safe yet. Clara will discover we've escaped by morning. We need to get help to expose what my father and Clara have done. Who would believe us? Isadora asked. Your father is a powerful man in these parts. The sheriff is an honest man. With your mother's journal as evidence, he'll have to investigate. Sebastian took her hand. We'll go to town tonight. My mother's sister lives there. She never approved of my father. She'll help us. As they started toward the road, a twig snapped behind them. They turned to see Clara standing there, a pistol in her hand. Going somewhere? She asked, her voice dangerously calm. Sebastian pushed Isadora behind him. Clara, put the gun down. This has gone far enough. I agree, Clara said, the moonlight reflecting off the barrel of the pistol as she raised it. Which is why you both need to disappear, just like her mother did. You killed my mother, Isadora said, stepping out from behind Sebastian. Where is she? What did you do with her? Clara smiled coldly. Don't worry, you'll be joining her soon enough. Sebastian lunged forward suddenly, trying to knock the gun from Clara's hand. There was a struggle, and in the confusion, the gun went off. The sound of the shot echoed through the orchard. Sebastian staggered backward, clutching his shoulder. Blood seeped between his fingers, dark in the moonlight. Sebastian! Isadora cried, rushing to his side. Clara laughed, pointing the gun at them again. How touching. The master falls for the slave girl like something from a bad novel. But before she could pull the trigger again, another shot rang out. Clara's eyes widened in surprise. The gun fell from her hand as she crumpled to the ground. Behind her stood Lord Blackwood, his own pistol still smoking in his hand. "Father?" Sebastian said in disbelief, still holding his wounded shoulder. Lord Blackwood's face was grim as he looked down at Clara's body. He betrayed us all. She and Davis planned to take everything." "You know," Sebastian asked, "I discovered their scheme tonight. Davis couldn't keep his mouth shut while drinking at the club." Lord Blackwood moved closer, his eyes flicking to Isadora. "I never meant for any of this to happen." "You imprisoned my mother," Isadora said, her voice shaking with anger. "What did you do to her?" Lord Blackwood's expression changed, something like regret crossing his features. "I didn't kill her, if that's what you're asking. I had her sent away to a sanatorium in Switzerland. I told myself it was for her own good, that she had become unstable, a danger to herself." "You lied," Sebastian said, his voice hard despite his pain. "You wanted her land." "Yes," his father admitted. "The minerals beneath it would have saved our family from ruin. I did what I thought necessary." "Is she still alive?" Isadora asked, hardly daring to hope. Lord Blackwood nodded slowly. "As far as I know, I receive reports twice a year. The last one came 3 months ago." Isadora felt as if the ground had dropped away beneath her feet. After all these years believing her mother had abandoned her or was dead, to learn that she was alive. "I want to see her," she said. "I want to bring her home." "And you will," Sebastian said, taking her hand with his good one. "Father, you need to make this right. All of it." Lord Blackwood looked at his son for a long moment, then at Isadora. Finally, he sighed heavily. "I've lost my way, haven't I? Become the kind of man I always despised." He holstered his pistol. "Come, we need to get that wound looked at, then we'll talk about what happens next." As they walked back toward the house, leaving Clara's body to be dealt with later, Isadora felt as if she were walking in a dream. Everything had changed in a single night. Her mother was alive. The truth about her imprisonment had been revealed. And Sebastian, the master's son who had seen her when no one else did, had risked his life for her. The future was uncertain, filled with questions yet to be answered. But for the first time in years, Isadora had hope. Real hope. And as Sebastian's hand held hers, she knew that whatever came next, she wouldn't face it alone. Behind them, the moon cast long shadows through the orchard, where Clara lay still and silent, her schemes dying with her. In the distance, the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon, a new day for Blackwood Manor and for Isadora, a day of truth, of justice, and perhaps of love. Sebastian's wound wasn't as serious as they had feared. The bullet had passed through the fleshy part of his shoulder, missing bone and major blood vessels. The family doctor was summoned and, after treating Sebastian, was sworn to secrecy about the night's events. Lord Blackwood had Clara's body moved to her room, creating a story that she had taken her own life in a fit of depression, a tale the doctor reluctantly agreed to support. A message was sent to Michael Davis, informing him of Clara's death and warning him to stay away from Blackwood affairs if he wished to avoid scandal or worse. 3 days later, Isadora sat in the library with Sebastian and his father. The air between them was tense, but no longer hostile. "I've contacted the sanatorium," Lord Blackwood said, looking older than his years. "Your mother will be released into your care. I've arranged for her travel home." "When?" Isadora asked, hardly able to believe it was really happening. 2 weeks, perhaps less. He handed her an envelope. "This contains the deed to your mother's property, free and clear. It rightfully belongs to your family." Sebastian, his arm in a sling, looked at his father with a mixture of anger and grudging respect. "And the minerals beneath the land?" Lord Blackwood sighed. "I propose a partnership. The Wilson land remains in their ownership, but we form a company to extract the minerals, sharing the profits equally." He looked at Isadora. "It would benefit both our families." "I'll need to discuss it with my mother when she returns," Isadora said, her voice stronger than it had been in years. "Of course." Lord Blackwood rose from his chair. "There's one more thing." He went to his desk and retrieved a document. "This is the record of your debt to this family. Consider it paid in full with my apologies for the wrong done to you and your mother." He tore the document in half, then in quarters, then dropped the pieces into the fireplace. They all watched as the paper blackened and curled in the flames. "You're free, Isadora. Free to go, or," he glanced at his son, "free to stay, if that's what you choose." With that, he left the library, closing the door softly behind him. Sebastian moved to sit beside Isadora on the sofa. He's trying to make amends. It doesn't erase what he did, but it's a start. "I never thought I'd see my mother again," Isadora said, tears filling her eyes. "All these years I believed she had abandoned me or was dead. Now you'll have her back." Sebastian too gave her hand. "And the land that is rightfully yours." Isadora looked down at their joined hands. "What happens now, Sebastian? Between us? What do you want to happen?" he asked softly. "I don't know. Everything is changing so fast. Yesterday I was a servant, bound by debt. Today I'm free, a landowner, with a mother returning from exile." She met his eyes. "And there's you, the master's son who saw me when no one else did." "I'm not your master, Isadora. I never want to be." His eyes were serious. "What I want is to court you properly if you'll allow it. To see where this feeling between us might lead, now that we're both free to choose." Isadora thought of all the times their eyes had met across rooms, all the unspoken words and feelings that had passed between them. She thought of how he had risked everything to help her discover the truth, how he had nearly died protecting her from Clara. "I would like that," she said finally, a smile breaking through her tears. "But what will people say? The son of Lord Blackwood courting a former servant." Sebastian laughed. "Let them talk. I've never cared much for society's rules anyway." His expression grew more serious. "Besides, you're the daughter of Eleanor Wilson, owner of some of the most valuable land in the county. That should satisfy even the worst gossips." "Is that why you want to court me? For my land?" she teased, feeling a lightness she hadn't experienced in years. "No," he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I want to court you because when I look into your eyes, I see someone brave and true, someone who has endured hardship without losing her dignity or compassion, someone I could love for a lifetime if given the chance." Isadora felt her heart swell with emotion. After years of keeping her eyes downcast, of hiding her thoughts and feelings, to be seen so clearly, to be valued for who she truly was, felt like a miracle. "Then I give you that chance," she whispered, "and I'll look forward to seeing where it leads." Sebastian smiled, and in his eyes, Isadora saw a future she had never dared to imagine, one of freedom, of family restored, and of love freely given and received. Outside the library window, spring sunshine filtered through the trees, casting dappled light on the lawn of Blackwood M. Anna, the old house which had held so many secrets and sorrows, now seemed to breathe easier, as if a long-held curse had finally been lifted. For Isadora, once a slave girl in all but name, a new life was beginning, one where she could hold her head high, meet any gaze without fear, and follow her heart wherever it might lead. 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity and anticipation. Clara's funeral was a small, somber affair, with the official story of A.A. Shyside accepted without much question. Michael Davis did not attend, having suddenly departed for Europe on business matters after receiving Lord Blackwood's warning. For Isadora, the days were filled with preparations for her mother's return. She had moved out of the servants' quarters into a guest room in the family wing of the house, a change that caused much gossip among the staff. Mrs. Winters was the only one who seemed genuinely happy about Isadora's change in status. "Always knew you were meant for better things," the cook said one morning as Isadora sat in the kitchen drinking tea, something she would never have dared to do as a servant. "The way that boy looked at you, it was only a matter of time." Isadora blushed. "It's not just about Sebastian. It's about justice for my mother." "Justice is all well and good," Mrs. Winters replied with a knowing smile. "But love is better. And don't try to tell me there's no love between you two." "I've got eyes in my head." Isadora couldn't deny it. In the days since the confrontation in the orchard, she and Sebastian had grown closer. Each evening they would walk in the gardens or sit in the library, talking for hours. Sometimes they spoke of serious matters, the future of her mother's property, the sins of his father, the changes needed at Blackwood Manor. Other times they shared simpler things, favorite books, sea Hildhood memories, dreams for the future. Sebastian's shoulder was healing well, though he still wore his arm in a sling. He joked that his wound was worth it for the way Isadora fussed over him, making sure he was comfortable and helping him with tasks that required two hands. Lord Blackwood, for his part, had become a changed man, quieter, more reflective. He spent hours in his study, putting the family affairs in order. He had made a public announcement about forming a new mining company in partnership with the Wilson estate, though he carefully avoided mentioning Isadora or her mother by name. The story he crafted for public consumption was that Eleanor Wilson had been in a private sanatorium, recovering from a nervous condition, and that her daughter would now be recognized as her heir. It wasn't the whole truth, but it would protect both families from scandal, while still acknowledging Isadora's rightful place. As the day of Eleanor's arrival approached, Isadora grew increasingly nervous. She had been only 16 when her mother disappeared. Now, at 23, she was a different person. Would her mother recognize her? Would they still feel the same connection they once had? And how would Eleanor react to Sebastian, the son of the man who had imprisoned her? On the morning Eleanor was due to arrive, Isadora stood before the mirror in her room, fussy-ung with her hair and dress. A knock at the door interrupted her nervous preparations. "Come in," she called, expecting it to be the maid. Instead, Sebastian entered, looking handsome in a dark suit, his arm finally free of the sling, though he still moved it carefully. "You look beautiful," he said, his eyes warm as they took in her appearance. Isadora smoothed the skirt of her new dress, a simple but elegant blue gown that Sebastian had insisted on having made for her. "I'm so nervous. What if she's changed? What if I've changed too much?" Sebastian crossed the room and took her hands in his. "She's your mother. That bond doesn't break, no matter how much time has passed. What if she hates your family for what they did to her? What if she can't accept us?" Sebastian brought her hands to his lips and kissed them gently. "Then we'll give her time. She has every right to be angry, Isadora. We won't rush her." A knock at the front door echoed through the house, making Isadora jump. "She's here," she whispered, her heart pounding. Together, they went downstairs to the entrance hall, where Lord Blackwood already stood waiting, looking unusually nervous himself. Mrs. Winters had gathered the staff to one side, all of them curious about this woman who had caused such changes in the household. The butler opened the door to reveal a thin woman in a plain traveling dress. Her dark hair was streaked with grey, and her face showed lines of hardship, but her eyes, Isadora's eyes, were bright and alert as they scanned the entrance hall. Those eyes found Isadora, and time seemed to stop. "Mama?" Isadora whispered, hardly daring to believe this moment was real. Eleanor Wilson stared at her daughter, tears filling her eyes. "My Isadora, my baby girl." Isadora rushed forward, and her mother's arms opened to receive her. They clung to each other, both weeping openly as years of separation dissolved in their embrace. "I thought I'd never see you again," Eleanor said, pulling back to look at her daughter's face. "Look how beautiful you've become, a woman now." "I thought you'd abandoned me," Isadora confessed through her tears. "Then I thought you were dead. I never knew—" "Shh," Eleanor soothed, stroking her daughter's hair. "We're together now. That's all that matters." After several moments, Eleanor's gaze moved past Isadora to the two men standing awkwardly by the staircase. Her eyes hardened as they fell on Lord Blackwood. "Richard," she said, her voice cold, "you look older." Lord Blackwood stepped forward, his usually commanding presence diminished by obvious guilt. "Eleanor, I know no apology can make up for what I did to you, but—" "No," she interrupted, "it can't. But you've returned my daughter to me, and for that, I will try to find forgiveness." Her eyes moved to Sebastian. "And you must be the son. You have your mother's eyes." Sebastian bowed slightly. "Sebastian Blackwood, ma'am. I'm very glad to meet you." A small smile touched Eleanor's lips. "I can see by the way you look at my daughter that you're not much like your father." Sebastian glanced at Isadora, love clear in his expression. "I hope not, ma'am." Mrs. Winters stepped forward then, breaking the tension. "Miss Eleanor, do you remember me?" Eleanor's face lit up with genuine pleasure. "Margaret Winters, still keeping this kitchen running, I see." "Someone has to feed these people properly," Mrs. Winters replied with a grin. "Come, you must be exhausted from your journey. I've prepared your old favorite, lemon cakes and tea." As Mrs. Winters led Eleanor toward the kitchen, with Isadora following close behind, Sebastian turned to his father. "That went better than expected," he said quietly. Lord Blackwood nodded, looking after the women with a thoughtful expression. "She always had grace, Eleanor Wilson, more than I deserved." He placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Don't make my mistakes, Sebastian. Pride and greed cost me everything that truly mattered. Don't let them cost you." With that, he turned and walked slowly toward his study, suddenly looking every one of his 60 years. The days that followed, we were a time of healing and discovery. Eleanor was given a comfortable suite of rooms in the family wing, not far from Isadora's. Though still frail from her years in the sanatorium, she grew stronger daily. Her spirit seemingly unbroken by her ordeal, Isadora spent every moment she could with her mother, making up for lost time. They would sit in the garden for hours, sharing stories of the years they had missed in each other's lives. Eleanor spoke little of her time in Switzerland, saying only that while she had been treated well physically, the isolation and helplessness had been a kind of torture. "They told me you knew where I was," she confided one afternoon as they sat beneath an apple tree in the orchard. "That you didn't want to see me because you were ashamed of my condition." Isadora's eyes filled with tears. "I never knew. After Father died, Lord Blackwood told me you had simply left Abe and done us both." Eleanor took her daughter's hand. "I would never have left you willingly. You must know that." "I do now, but for years I believed his lies." Isadora hesitated, then asked the question that had been on her mind. "Mama, what really happened? Why did Lord Blackwood send you away?" Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, her eyes distant with memory. "It was because of the land your father left me, land that had been in his family for generatio aenes. It wasn't much, just a small farm, really, but Richard discovered that it contained valuable minerals." "Coal?" Isadora asked. "No, something more valuable. Copper primarily, but other metals too. When he found out, he tried to buy the land from me, offering far less than it was worth. I refused," she smiled sadly. "I wasn't being stubborn. That land was your inheritance, the only thing of value your father had to leave you. I wanted to preserve it. So he imprisoned you to force you to sign it over." Eleanor nodded. "At first. He kept me in that cellar for months, visiting every few days to see if I'd changed my mind. I never did." Her voice hardened. "Then one night, he came with Clara's father. They drugged me, and when I woke, I was on a ship bound for Europe." "Clara knew about this?" Isadora asked, though she already knew the answer. "Oh yes, she was younger then, but already cold and calculating. She would sometimes come to the cellar to mock me." Eleanor shuddered at the memory. "The sanatorium was her father's idea. They forged papers claiming I was mentally unstable, a danger to myself and others. Once I was committed, they could control my affairs for my own good." "But they never got the land," Isadora said. "No. I had hidden the deed where they couldn't find it, and I never told them where it was, no matter what they threatened." Eleanor's eyes shone with quiet pride. "It seems Richard finally found it, though. He returned it to me after what happened with Clara." Isadora had told her mother a simplified version of those events, sparing her the worst details. Eleanor looked out over the orchard to the spot where Clara had died. "So much pain and betrayal, all for a piece of land." She turned back to Isadora. "But enough about the past. Tell me about Sebastian. I see the way he looks at you, and the way you look at him." Isadora blushed. "He's not like his father, Mama. He helped me discover the truth. He nearly died protecting me from Clara." "And you love him," Eleanor said. It wasn't a question. "I do," Isadora admitted. "But I wasn't sure if you would approve, after everything his family did to us." Eleanor considered this. The sins of the father are not the sins of the son, Isadora. If Sebastian has proven himself worthy of your love, then I won't stand in your way. But, she added with a mother's concern, be careful with your heart. The Blackwood men have a history of putting wealth and status above all else. Sebastian's different, Isadora insisted. He sees me for who I really am. Eleanor smiled at her daughter's certainty. Then I look forward to knowing him better. As if summoned by their conversation, Sebastian appeared at the edge of the orchard, hesitating when H.E. saw them together. Eleanor waved him over. Join us, Sebastian. I was just telling Isadora how eager I am to know the man who has captured my daughter's heart. Sebastian approached with a mixture of caution and hope. I don't want to interrupt your time together, Mrs. Wilson. Please, call me Eleanor, and you're not interrupting. In fact, I have a proposition for you both. She gestured for him to sit on the bench beside Isadora. I've been thinking about the mining partnership your father proposed. If you'd rather not go forward with it, I completely understand, Sebastian said quickly. Eleanor shook her head. Actually, I think it's a good business decision, but I'd like to modify the arrangement slightly. She looked at them both. I want Isadora to represent our family interests in the company, with you, Sebastian, representing the Blackwood side. You would work together as equal partners. Sebastian's eyes widened in surprise. That's unconventional. So is a former servant girl falling in love with the master's son? Eleanor replied with a smile. Times are changing, Sebastian. Women are gaining more rights and opportunities. Why shouldn't my daughter be at the forefront of that change? Isadora looked at her mother with newfound admiration. Despite everything she had endured, Eleanor Wilson was still a woman of strength and vision. I don't know anything about mining, Isadora protested. You'll learn, Eleanor said confidently. You're intelligent and determined. Sebastian can help you with the business aspects, at least until you find your footing. Sebastian's face had broken into a broad smile. I think it's a brilliant idea. The Wilson Blackwood Mining Company, led by the next generation. He took Isadora's hand. What do you think? Isadora felt a surge of excitement at the thought of B yielding something new, something that could secure both their futures. I think I'd like to try. Eleanor watched them with satisfaction. Good. We'll speak to Lord Blackwood about it tomorrow. She rose from the bench. Now, if you'll excuse me, I think I'll rest before dinner. These old bones aren't as strong as they once were. As Eleanor walked back toward the house, Sebastian and Isadora remained in the orchard, his arm around her shoulders. Your mot? Her is remarkable, Sebastian said. To endure what she did and still maintain such strength and dignity. Now I know where I get my stubbornness from, Isadora replied with a smile. Sebastian laughed. Indeed. His expression grew more serious. Do you really want to go into business together? It won't be easy. There will be many who won't accept a woman in such a position, especially one who was once a servant. All the more reason to do it, Isadora essayed, her chin lifting with determination. I spent 5 years keeping my eyes down, Sebastian. I don't intend to do that ever again. He kissed her then, gently at first, then with growing passion. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. I love you, Isadora Wilson, Sebastian said, resting his forehead against hers, and I'm proud to stand beside you, in business and in life. I love you too, she whispered back, more than I ever thought possible. As the sun began to set over the orchard, casting long shadows across the grass, they sat together planning their future, a future neither of them could have imagined just weeks before. Lord Blackwood surprised them all by embracing Eleanor's proposal enthusiastically. Perhaps it was guilt over his past actions, or perhaps he truly saw the wisdom in having the younger generation take control. Whatever his reasons, within days, lawyers had been summoned, papers drawn up, and the Wilson Blackwood Mining Company officially created. True to Eleanor's vision, Isadora and Sebastian were named as managing partners, with Lord Blackwood and Eleanor serving as advisors only. The news caused a sensation in the county. A woman, and a former servant at that, in such a position of authority was unprecedented. The reactions were mixed. Some, particularly the older families, were scandalized. Others, more progressive in their thinking, applauded the forward-thinking arrangement. What no one could deny was that the partnership made good business sense. The Wilson land contained valuable resources, and the Blackwood name still carried weight, despite recent financial troubles. For Isadora, the weeks that followed were a whirlwind of learning. Sebastian patiently taught her about contracts, investments, and business negotiations. She proved a quick study, her natural intelligence finally finding an outlet after years of suppression. Together, they visited the Wilson property, Isadora's first time seeing the land her mother had fought so hard to protect. It was smaller than she had imagined, just a few hundred acres of rolling hills and woodland, with a modest farmhouse that had stood empty for years. "It doesn't look like much," Isadora said as they stood on a hilltop overlooking the property. "That's what makes your mother. Has fight so remarkable," Sebastian replied. She knew what lay beneath the surface when no one else did. Engineers had been hired to survey the land, confirming the presence of a significant copper deposit, along with smaller amounts of silver and other minerals. Initial estimates suggested the mine could be highly profitable for decades to come. "We'll need to be careful about how we develop it," Isadora said thoughtfully. "I don't want to destroy the LA end in the process of extracting what's beneath it." Sebastian squeezed her hand. "That's why you're perfect for this role. You care about more than just profits." As they walked the property, Isadora felt a connection to the land that surprised her. This had been her father's family home for generations. Somewhere in the small cemetery on the eastern edge, her grandparents and great-grandparents were buried. This was her heritage, as much a part of her as the blood in her veins. "I want to restore the house," she told Sebastian as they examined the weathered structure. "Not just for show, but to live in." Sebastian looked surprised. "You want to live here, not at Blackwood Manor?" "This is where I belong," Isadora said simply. "It's in my blood." Understanding dawned in Sebastian's eyes. "You're right. This should be your home." He looked around at the dusty, neglected rooms. "Our home, perhaps, someday." Isadora's heart skipped a beat at his words. "Someday," she agreed softly. 3 months after Eleanor's return, on a warm summer evening, Sebastian asked Isadora to join him for a special dinner in the garden at Blackwood Manor. The staff had outdone themselves, setting up a small table beneath a canopy of twinkling lights strung through the trees. Flowers covered every surface, their sweet scent filling the air. "What's the occasion?" Isadora asked as Sebastian held her chair for her. "Do I need an occasion to dine with the most beautiful woman in the county?" he replied with a smile. They enjoyed a delicious meal prepared by Mrs. Winters, who had taken a personal interest in the evening, insisting on cooking all of Isadora's favorite dishes. Throughout dinner, Sebastian seemed distracted, almost nervous, so unlike his usual confident self that Isadora grew concerned. "Is something wrong?" she asked as they finished dessert. "You've seemed on edge all evening." Sebastian took a deep breath. "Nothing's wrong. In fact, everything is finally right." He reached across the table and took her hand. "Isadora, these past months have been the happiest of my life. Working with you, seeing you grow into your new role, watching you reconnect with your mother, it's been a privilege and a joy." Isadora felt a flutter of anticipation in her chest. "It's been wonderful for me too. But there's something missing," Sebastian continued, "something I hope you'll allow me to give you." He rose from his chair and, still holding her hand, knelt beside her on one knee. From his pocket he produced a small velvet box. "Isadora Wilson, will you do me the great honor of becoming my wife?" Tears sprang to Isadora's eyes as Sebastian opened the box to reveal a ring, not an ostentatious diamond as might be expected for a Blackwood bride, but a delicate band of gold set with small sapphires that matched her eyes. "It was my mother's," Sebastian explained, "not her engagement ring. That was a family heirloom my father reclaimed after her death. This was a gift he gave her when they were first courting, before wealth and status complicated everything. She told me once it was the only piece of jewelry that truly mattered to her." Isadora looked from the ring to Sebastian's hopeful face. 3 months ago, she had been a servant bound by debt and trapped in a life of subservience. Now she was a businesswoman, reunited with her mother, respected in her own right, and loved. Truly, deeply loved by a man who saw her for exactly who she was. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Sebastian, I will marry you." He slid the ring onto her finger, then rose to take her in his arms, kissing her with a passion that left her breathless. When they finally parted, applause erupted from the house. Looking up, Isadora saw her mother and Lord Blackwood standing on the terrace, along with Mrs. Winters and several other servants who had gathered to witness the moment. Eleanor wiped tears from her eyes as she came down the garden path to embrace her daughter. "I'm so happy for you, my darling girl," she said. "So very happy." Lord Blackwood shook his son's hand firmly. "Well done, Sebastian. She's a fine woman, worth far more than her weight in gold or copper." Mrs. Winters was openly weeping with joy. "I knew it. I told you all years ago, didn't I? The way he looked at her, even when she was just a maid. I knew it." Surrounded by their unlikely family, the reformed father, the resilient mother, the loyal servants, Sebastian and Isadora shared a look of pure happiness. The path that had brought them to this moment had been difficult and dangerous, filled with secrets and deep pain. But now, with the truth revealed and old wrongs beginning to be made right, they could look forward to a future built on honesty, respect, and love. That night, as Isadora lay in bed looking at the ring on her finger, she thought about how far she had come, from a servant girl who kept her eyes down, to a woman who could look anyone in the eye as an equal, from someone bound by a false debt to someone free to choose her own path. She thought of her mother, sleeping peacefully down the hall after years of unjust confinement, of Sebastian, who had risked everything to help her discover the truth, of the home they would rebuild on her family land and the business they would build together. And she thought of Clara, whose scheming and cruelty had inadvertently set all of these changes in motion. In death, Clara had given Isadora what she had never intended: freedom, family, and love. As Isadora drifted off to sleep, she made a silent vow to herself. She would never take these gifts for granted. She would never again lower her eyes or hide her true self. And she would never forget the price that had been paid to bring her to this moment of happiness. For the eyes of the slave girl had finally seen the truth, and in that truth, she had found her freedom. The news of Sebastian Blackwood's engagement to Isadora Wilson spread through the county like wildfire. His scandal was delicious. The heir to one of the oldest families in the region, marrying a woman who had been his servant just months before. The gossip at teas and dinner parties was relentless. "I heard she bewitched him somehow," one elderly matron whispered behind her fan. No, another countered. "It's the land. That Wilson property is worth a fortune in minerals, they say. The Blackwoods were nearly bankrupt. But why marry her? He could have simply bought the land." Because she wouldn't sell, stubborn just like her mother. Eleanor Wilson, who had once been the subject of similar gossip, took it all in stride. At her first public appearance since returning, a charity event at the town hall, she held her head high as whispers followed her through the room. "Let them talk," she told Isadora, who was distressed by the cruel comments. "Words can't hurt us anymore. We know the truth." Sebastian was equally unconcerned with public opinion. At his club, where the men were less subtle in their disapproval, he calmly informed his critics that Isadora had more intelligence, courage, and integrity than all of them combined. "Any man who speaks ill of my fiancée will answer to me," he said, his voice carrying through the suddenly silent room. "And I promise you, gentlemen, it will not be a pleasant conversation." No one doubted his sincerity. The wound on his shoulder, which he made no effort to hide the cause of, was evidence enough of his willingness to fight for Isadora. Lord Blackwood, to everyone's surprise, stood firmly behind the engagement. At a business dinner with several prominent families, he raised his glass in a toast. "To my future daughter-in-law, Isadora Wilson, may she bring to the Blackwood name the honor, integrity, and wisdom it has sometimes lacked." It was as close to a public admission of wrongdoing as anyone had ever heard from Richard Blackwood, and it silenced many of the critics. Not all, however. Michael Davis had returned from Europe, and he was not pleased to find his plans in ruins, Clara dead, and the Wilson Blackwood Mining Company moving forward without him. He began spreading rumors that Isadora had seduced Sebastian to gain control of the Blackwood fortune, that Eleanor was mentally unstable, that Lord Blackwood was being manipulated by a pair of scheming women. More dangerously, He began making inquiries about Clara's death. The official story of suicide had been accepted initially, but Davis hinted publicly that there might be more to the story. A young, beautiful woman with everything to live for doesn't take her own life without reason, he was overheard saying at a dinner party. One has to wonder what or who drove her to such desperation. Sebastian confronted him outside the post office one afternoon. "Stop spreading lies about my family, Davis. You're playing a dangerous game." Davis smiled coldly. "Am I? Or are you the one in danger, Blackwood? What would happen if people learned the truth about that night in the orchard?" "Are you threatening me?" Sebastian asked, his voice low and de-angerous. "Consider it friendly advice. Call off this farce of an engagement, sell me the mining rights to the Wilson property, and perhaps I'll keep my suspicions to myself." Sebastian stepped closer, his eyes hard. "Listen carefully, because I'll only say this once. If you continue to threaten my family or spread lies about Isadora, I will destroy you. Not with violence, though I'm tempted, but by exposing your own dirty secrets. I know about your dealings with Clara, the plans you made together. I have evidence, Davis, letters. Think carefully before you push me further." Davis's face paled slightly, but his smile remained. "This isn't over, Blackwood. For your sake, I hope it is," Sebastian replied before walking away. That evening, he told Isadora and Eleanor about the confrontation. "Davis is dangerous," he warned. "He has nothing to lose now, and he blames us for Clara's death." "Should we be worried?" Eleanor asked, her face showing concern. Sebastian sighed. "I don't think he'll try anything directly. He's more likely to attack our reputations, try to undermine the mining company, turn public opinion against us even more than it already is." "Let him try," Isadora said firmly. "We have the truth on our side, and each other." Sebastian smiled at her determination. "Yes, we do. But still, be careful, both of you. Davis isn't the sort to give up easily. None of them realized just how far Michael Davis would go to get his revenge. But they would soon find out. The weeks leading up to Isadora and Sebastian's wedding were a whirlwind of activity. Despite the gossip and disapproval from certain quarters of society, many prominent families had accepted their invitations. Whether out of genuine goodwill or simple curiosity to witness such an unusual union, the guest list had grown impressively. Eleanor threw herself into the preparations with enthusiasm, determined that her daughter would have the wedding she deserved. The ceremony would be held in the garden at Blackwood Manor, followed by a reception that promised to be the social event of the season. "Nothing too ostentatious," Isadora had insisted. "I want it to be elegant, but simple." But Eleanor, having been denied the joy of watching her daughter grow up, would not be denied the pleasure of planning our wedding. Each day brought new decisions about flowers, music, and food, with Mrs. Winters taking personal charge of the wedding feast. Meanwhile, the Wilson Blackwood Mining Company had begun operations. The initial surveys had been completed, equipment ordered, and workers hired. Sebastian and Isadora spent their days overseeing the project, earning the respect of the engineers and foremen with their hands-on approach and clear vision. "You're a natural at this," Sebastian told Isadora, as they reviewed the latest reports in the small office they had set up on the Wilson property. "The men listened to you." "They didn't at first," Isadora replied with a smile. "But it's amazing how quickly attitudes change when you demonstrate competence." The renovations on the Wilson farmhouse were also progressing well. What had once been a modest, neglected structure was being transformed into a comfortable home that honored its history while providing modern conveniences. Isadora had insisted on doing much of the interior design herself, creating a warm, welcoming space that reflected her own taste, rather than the oppressive grandeur of Blackwood Manor. "This will be our sanctuary," she told Sebastian as they walked through the partially completed rooms, "a place where we're just Sebastian and Isadora, not Blackwood and Wilson." Sebastian had pulled her into his arms. "I'd be happy living in a shack as long as you were there," he said before kissing her soundly. But beneath the happiness and busy preparations, a shadow loomed. Michael Davis had not given up his campaign against them. The rumors about Clara's death had persisted, growing more elaborate with each telling. Some whispered that she had been murdered by Lord Blackwood to prevent her from exposing family secrets. Others suggested Sebastian himself had killed Hiar in a fit of jealous rage over her alleged affair with Davis. Most disturbing were the insinuations about Isadora that she had been Lord Blackwood's mistress before becoming involved with Sebastian, that she had somehow engineered Clara's death to take her place, that her sudden rise from servant to heiress was the result of blackmail and manipulation. Though they tried to ignore the gossip, it was taking a toll. Isadora noticed Sebastian becoming increasingly tense, especially when they went into town and encountered whispers and stares. Lord Blackwood retreated more and more to his study, emerging only for business matters. Even Eleanor, who had faced scandal before, found the constant speculation wearing. 1 week before the wedding, Davis made his boldest move yet. The county newspaper, which he had recently purchased, published an article questioning the circumstances of Clara's death and calling for an official investigation. "Tragic suicide or something more sinister," the headline blared. The article carefully avoided making direct accusations, but the implications were clear. Someone at Blackwood Manor had something to hide. Sebastian threw the paper down in disgust after reading it at breakfast. "This has gone too far. He's practically accusing us of murder." "What can we do?" Isadora asked, her appetite gone after seeing the article. "If we respond, it only gives more attention to his lies." "I'm going to speak to Sheriff Morgan," Lord Blackwood said decisively. "It's time to put an end to this nonsense once and for all." Eleanor reached across the table to take Isadora's hand. "Don't let him ruin your happiness, dear. That's exactly what he wants." Later that morning, as Isadora was reviewing the final seating arrangements for the wedding reception, the butler entered the drawing room with an urgent message. "Sheriff Morgan is here, miss. He wishes to speak with you and Mr. Sebastian immediately." Isadora's heart sank. Had Davis's campaign finally succeeded in forcing an official investigation? She sent for Sebastian, who was meeting with the mining engineer, and together they received the sheriff in the library. Sheriff Morgan was a tall, serious man with a weathered face and shrewd eyes. He had served the county for over 20 years and was no one for his fairness and discretion. "Thank you for seeing me," he said after they had exchanged greetings. "I apologize for the intrusion, especially with your wedding so near, but there's a matter that requires immediate attention." "Is this about the newspaper article?" Sebastian asked directly. "Because I can assure you, Sheriff, there's no truth to those insinuations." The sheriff nodded. "The article is part of it, yes, but there's something more serious." He hesitated, looking uncomfortable. "I received a letter this morning, supposedly written by Clara Rothschild the day before her death. It claims she feared for her life and names several people at Blackwood Manor as threats to her safety." "That's ridiculous," Sebastian exclaimed. "Clara took her own life." The doctor confirmed it. Sheriff Morgan's expression remained neutral. "The letter is quite detailed, Mr. Blackwood, and it raises questions that I'm obligated to investigate, regardless of my personal feelings." "May we see this letter?" Isadora asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. The sheriff reached into his coat pocket and withdrew an envelope. "I made a copy. The original is in my office." Isadora took the letter with trembling hands. The handwriting did indeed look like Clara's. She had seen it often enough while serving as her maid. But as she read through the melodramatic claims of fear and danger, something struck her as odd. "Sheriff," she said slowly, "when did you say you received this?" "This morning. It was delivered by Mr. Davis himself, who claimed it had been entrusted to him by Miss Rothschild." Isadora glanced at Sebastian, who had been reading over her shoulder. "And he's just producing it now, 3 months after her death." The sheriff nodded. "That was my question as well. He claims he only recently found it among her belongings, which were sent to him as her close friend." Sebastian took the letter from Isadora and examined it more closely. "Sheriff, I believe this letter is a forgery. A clever one, but a forgery nonetheless." "That's a serious accusation, Mr. Blackwood." "So is murder," Sebastian replied firmly. "Look at the date on this letter. May 15th, the day before Clara died." "Yes, that's correct." Sebastian turned to Isadora. "Do you remember what Clara was wearing that day? The color of her dress?" Isadora thought back, picturing Clara as she had helped her dress that morning. Blue, a dark blue walking dress with white trim. Exactly. Sebastian pointed to a passage in the letter. As I write this, wearing the new green gown Sebastian gave me for my birthday, he looked up at the sheriff. Clara wasn't wearing green that day, and her birthday wasn't until August. I never gave her a green gown. Sheriff Morgan's eyes narrowed slightly. That's interesting, but hardly proof of forgery. There's more, Isadora said, taking the letter back. Look at this mention of the East Garden where I like to sit and read. Blackwood Manor doesn't have an East Garden. The east side of the property is all woodland. And here, Sebastian added, she refers to Lord Blackwood's prized roses. My father has never grown roses. He's allergic to them. The sheriff was beginning to look thoughtful. Small details that someone who didn't live here might get wrong. Someone like Michael Davis, Sebastian suggested. Sheriff, Clara was involved with Davis for months before her death. They were plotting together to take control of the Blackwood estate and the Wilson property. That's quite a claim, Mr. Blackwood. We have proof, Isadora said. Letters between them detailing their plans. The sheriff studied them both for a long moment. I'd very much like to see those letters. Sebastian went to his desk and unlocked a drawer, removing the packet of letters they had found in Clara's jewelry box. He handed them to the sheriff, who began reading through them with increasing interest. These appear genuine, he said finally, and they certainly establish a motive for Mr. Davis to want to cause trouble for your family. More than trouble, Sebastian said grimly. He wants revenge. Clara's death ruined their plans, and he blames us. Sheriff Morgan tucked the letters into his coat. With your permission, I'd like to keep these temporarily. They may be needed as evidence. Evidence? Isadora asked. Are you going to arrest Davis? Not yet, but I believe I have grounds to question him more thoroughly about this supposed letter from Miss Rothschild. The sheriff rose to his feet. In the meantime, I suggest you proceed with your wedding plans. I'll handle Mr. Davis. As they walked the sheriff to the door, he turned to them with a reassuring smile. Don't worry too much. False accusations have a way of falling apart under scrutiny. After he left, Isadora leaned against Sebastian, suddenly exhausted. Will this never end? Every time I think we're finally free to be happy, something else happens. Sebastian held her close. Davis made a mistake with that forged letter. He got careless, and now the sheriff is suspicious. This could be the beginning of the end for him. I hope you're right, Isadora sighed. I just want to be your wife without all this drama and suspicion surrounding us. You will be, Sebastian promised, kissing her forehead. In 1 week, no matter what Davis does, you'll be Mrs. Sebastian Blackwood. The day before the wedding, Isadora was in her room at Blackwood Manor, trying on her wedding dress one last time to ensure the final alterations were perfect. Eleanor stood behind her, adjusting the delicate veil that would cover her daughter's face during the ceremony. You look beautiful, Eleanor said, her eyes shining with tears. Your father would have been so proud. Isadora smiled at her mother's reflection in the mirror. I wish he could be here to see this. He is in a way, Eleanor replied softly. In your strength, your determination, you're so like him. A knock at the door interrupted their moment. The maid entered with an envelope on a silver tray. This just arrived for you, Miss Wilson. The messenger said it was urgent. Isadora took the envelope with a frown. There was no name or address written on it, just her first name in an unfamiliar hand. She opened it to find a single sheet of paper inside with a brief message. If you want to know the full truth about Clara's death, come to the old boathouse at the lake. Come alone or the information dies with me. This is your only chance. It was unsigned. What is it? Eleanor asked, noticing her daughter's expression. Isadora handed her the note. What do you think? A trap? Eleanor read it quickly, her brow furrowing. Most likely. Who sent it? There's no name. The handwriting isn't familiar. Isadora turned back to the mirror, removing her veil. I should show this to Sebastian. Yes, you should, Eleanor agreed. This has Michael Davis written all over it. But as Isadora changed out of her wedding dress, a thought nagged at her. What if it wasn't Davis? What if someone really did have information about Clara's death? Information that could clear their names once and for all. With the wedding tomorrow, It might be her last chance to put the whole ugly business behind them. "Mama," she said slowly, "what if there is something to this? Something that could end Davis's campaign against us?" Eleanor shook her head firmly. "It's not worth the risk. The boathouse is isolated, far from the main house. If someone wanted to harm you—" "I know," Isadora sighed. "You're right. I'll show Sebastian the note when he returns from town." But Sebastian was delayed in town longer than expected, dealing with last-minute wedding matters. As the afternoon wore on, Isadora found herself increasingly drawn to the idea of going to the boathouse. She kept picturing the newspaper headlines, the whispers that would follow them even on their wedding day, the cloud of suspicion that Davis had created. "I'll be careful," she told herself as she put on her walking boots. "I'll just go and see who's there. If it seems dangerous, I'll leave immediately." She told her mother she was going for a walk to clear her head before dinner. Not exactly a lie, but not the whole truth either. Eliano R., busy with wedding preparations, simply reminded her not to be late. The lake was a quarter-mile from the main house, hidden behind a stand of old oak trees. The boathouse, a small wooden structure built generations ago, stood at the water's edge, seldom used now that the Blackwoods rarely entertained on the lake. As Isadora approached, her steps slowed. Was she being foolish? Should she have waited for Sebastian after all? But she had come this far, and her curiosity drove her forward. The boathouse door was ajar, creaking slightly in the breeze. Isadora paused at the entrance, listening for any sound from within. Hearing nothing, she pushed the door open wider and stepped inside. The interior was dim, with light filtering through dusty windows. Old rowboats hung from the ceiling, and fishing equipment lined the walls. The air smelled of damp wood and stagnant water. "Hello," Isadora called. "Is anyone here?" A movement in the shadows at the far end of the boathouse caught her eye. Someone was sitting in an old chair, partially hidden behind a stack of crates. "I got your note," Isadora said, taking a cautious step forward. "What information do you have about Clara?" The figure stood slowly and moved into a shaft of light from the window. Isadora gasped. It was Michael Davis. "Miss Wilson," he said with a cold smile. "How good of you to come. And alone," A.S. instructed. Isadora took a step back toward the door. "I should have known this was a trick." "Not a trick," Davis replied, moving closer. "Let's call it an opportunity for both of us." "I have nothing to say to you, Mr. Davis." Isadora turned to leave, but Davis was quicker, blocking her path to the door. "But I have much to say to you," he said, his voice hardening. "About Clara, about Sebastian, about the lies you've all been telling." Isadora held her ground, refusing to show fear despite the rapid beating of her heart. "The only lies are the ones you've been spreading. The sheriff knows your letter is a forgery." Davis's smile faded. "That old fool doesn't know anything, but you do, don't you? You know exactly what happened that night in the orchard." "Clara tried to kill Sebastian," Isadora said firmly. "She would have killed me too." "Because you drove her to it," Davis's voice rose in anger. You seduced Sebastian, turned him against her. She was desperate." Isadora shook her head in disbelief. "Is that what you believe? Clara never loved Sebastian. She was using him just as she was using you. Did you really not know she was planning to betray you too, once she had control of the Blackwood estate?" Doubt flickered briefly in Davis's eyes, but was quickly replaced by hatred. Lies, more lies. "She kept a journal," Isadora said, the words coming to her suddenly. "Have you seen it? She wrote about all her plans, including how she intended to discard you once she had what she wanted." It was a bluff. Clara had never mentioned a journal, but Isadora could see it hit home. Davis hesitated, uncertainty crossing his face. "You're trying to confuse me," he said finally. "It won't work. I know what I have to do." He reached into his coat and pulled out a pistol. Isadora's blood ran cold at the sight of the weapon. "What are you doing, Mr. Davis?" "Finishing what Clara started," he replied, his voice eerily calm now. "You'll disappear, just like Clara was supposed to make you disappear. Only this time there won't be any miraculous escape." "You're talking about murder," Isadora said, trying to keep her voice steady. "You'll hang for it. Davis laughed harshly. "No one knows you're here. By the time they find your body, if they find it at all, I'll be far away." He gestured with the pistol. "Now move over there by the water door." The water door was an opening in the floor of the boathouse where boats could be launched directly into the lake. It was currently open, dark water visible below. Isadora's mind raced as she slowly moved in the direction he indicated. If he meant to shoot her and drop her body into the lake, she had only moments to act. But what could she do against an armed man? "Your plan won't work," she said, trying to buy time. "Sebastian knows I went for a walk. They'll search for me when I don't return." "By then it will be too late," Davis replied, following her with the pistol aimed at her chest. "The lake is deep here. Once weighted down, a body might never be found." Isadora felt a chill that had nothing to do with the damp air of the boathouse. He had clearly thought this through. This was no impulsive act of revenge, but a calculated murder. As she neared the water door, her foot struck something solid, an old oar leaning against the wall. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it might be her only chance. "Stop there," Davis ordered when she was at the edge of the opening. The black water of the lake rippled a few feet below, cold and uninviting. Isadora turned to face him, her hand inching toward the oar. "Why are you doing this? Clara is gone. Nothing you do will bring her back. This isn't just about Clara," Davis said, his finger tightening on the trigger. "It's about what's mine. The Wilson land should have been mine. My grandfather owned it before your family cheated him out of it." "What?" Isadora's hand froze halfway to the oar. "What are you talking about?" Davis's eyes gleamed with a fanatical light. "Your precious mother never told you. The Wilson farm originally belonged to the Davis family. My grandfather lost it in a card game to your grandfather, a game that was rigged. Everything your family has was stolen from mine." Isadora stared at him in shock. Could it be true? Was this decades-old grievance the real R. Eason behind his hatred? "I didn't know," she said truthfully, "but even if what you say is true, that was generations ago. It has nothing to do with us." "It has everything to do with us," Davis shouted. "That land is my birthright. The minerals beneath it should have made my family wealthy, not yours." In his agitation, the pistol wavered slightly. Isadora seized the moment, grabbing the oar and swinging it with all her strength. It struck Davis's arm, ending the pistol flying from his hand. The weapon clattered to the wooden floor, sliding toward the water door. Davis roared with rage and lunged at Isadora. They grappled near the edge of the opening, perilously close to falling into the dark water below. Despite her fear, Isadora fought with the strength of someone who knew her life depended on it. "Let go of me," she cried as Davis's hands closed around her throat. "You'll die just like Clara," he snarled, his face contorted with hatred. Isadora's vision began to blur as his grip tightened. With her last bit of strength, she brought her knee up sharply between his legs. Davis howled in pain, his grip loosening just enough for Isadora to twist away. But in doing so, she lost her balance. With a scream, she fell backward through the water door. The cold lake enveloped her, the shock of it driving the air from her lungs. Her heavy skirts immediately began to drag her down. From above, she heard Davis's triumphant laugh. "Goodbye, Miss Wilson. Give Clara my regards." Then he was gone, his footsteps receding as he fled the boathouse. Isadora fought against the weight of her clothing, struggling to reach the surface. She had learned to swim as a child in this very lake, but never fully dressed in walking boots and layers of petticoats. Each upward movement was agony, her lungs burning for air. Just when she thought she couldn't hold her breath any longer, her head broke the surface. She gasped, drawing precious air into her lungs. The water door was several feet above her now, impossible to reach without something to climb on. She would have to swim around to the shore. But her waterlogged clothes were so heavy, each movement a tremendous effort. The shore seemed impossibly far away. "Help!" she called, her voice weak and quickly swallowed by the vastness of the lake. "Someone help me!" But there was no one to hear her. The boathouse was too far from the main house, and Sebastian was still in town. She was alone. As she struggled to stay afloat, Isadora thought of Sebastian, of her mother, of the wedding that was supposed to take place tomorrow. She couldn't die like this, not when happiness was finally within her grasp. With renewed determination, she began to shed layers of clothing, fighting her way out of her heavy jacket and kicking off her boots. Lighter now, she started to swim toward shore, using the slow, steady strokes her father had taught her long ago. Every movement was a battle against exhaustion, but Isadora refused to give up. Yard by yard, she made her way closer to land. Her arms ached, her legs felt like lead, but still she pushed on. Finally, her feet touched the muddy bottom of the lake. With the last of her strength, she dragged herself onto the shore, collapsing on the grassy bank, gasping and shivering. She had survived, but Davis was gone. Gone to spread more lies, or perhaps to flee the county entirely. Either way, he remained a threat to her happiness, to her future with Sebastian. Isadora lay on the shore for several minutes, gathering her strength. Then, slowly, painfully, she got to her feet and began the long walk back to Blackwood Manor. Sebastian returned from town to find the house in an uproar. Isadora had been missing for hours, and search parties were being organized to comb the grounds. She said she was going for a walk before dinner, Eleanor explained, her face pale with worry. But that was 3 hours ago. It's not like her to disappear without a word, especially the day before the wedding. Sebastian's heart clenched with fear. Has anyone checked the lake? The old trails? Lord Blackwood has men searching everywhere, Eleanor replied. But there's no sign of her. Just then, there was a commotion at the front door. Sebastian rushed into the entrance hall to find Isadora being supported by one of the groundskeepers. She was soaking wet, her hair plastered to her head, her dress torn and muddy. But she was alive. Isadora! Sebastian ran to her, taking her from the groundskeeper's arms. What happened? Are you hurt? Michael Davis, she managed to say through chattering teeth. The boathouse, he tried to kill me. Sebastian's face darkened with rage as he lifted her into his arms and carried her upstairs. Eleanor followed, already calling for hot water, blankets, and brandy. Once Isadora was warm and dry, wrapped in blankets in her bed with a cup of hot tea in her hands, she told them everything. The note, her decision to go alone, Davis's revelations about his family's connection to the Wilson land, and his attempt to murder her. I never should have gone, she finished, looking at Sebastian with tears in her eyes. It was foolish and dangerous, but I wanted so badly to end this, to clear our names before the wedding. Sebastian sat on the edge of the bed, holding her hand tightly. None of this is your fault, but I'm going to make sure Davis pays for what he's done. Lord Blackwood, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped into the room. I've already sent for Sheriff Morgan. Davis won't get away with this. Eleanor stroked her daughter's damp hair. The important thing is that you're safe. The wedding can be postponed if necessary. No, Isadora said firmly. I won't let Davis win. The wedding will go on as planned. She looked at Sebastian. Unless you've changed your mind about marrying a woman who attracts so much trouble. Sebastian smiled, relief evident in his eyes. Never, in fact, I think I'll keep you, even closer from now on, to make sure you stay out of lakes and away from madmen with pistols. Sheriff Morgan arrived within the hour, taking Isadora's statement and organizing a search for Davis. But by morning there was no sign of him. He had vanished, presumably fleeing the county after his failed attempt on Isadora's life. We'll find him, the sheriff promised. Men like Davis always make mistakes. In the meantime, I've issued a statement to the newspaper retracting the previous article and clarifying the circumstances of Miss Rothschild's death. With that assurance, the wedding preparations continued. Despite her ordeal, Isadora insisted on keeping to the schedule. I've waited long enough to be Sebastian's wife, she told her mother. I won't wait a day longer. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, as if nature itself approved of the union. The gardens of Blackwood Manor had been transformed with flowers, ribbons, and a white canopy under which the ceremony would take place. Guests began arriving early, their curiosity about the unusual couple overcoming any lingering disapproval. The story of Isadora's near drowning and Davis's flight had spread quickly, adding a dramatic new chapter to the already sensational tale of the servant girl and the master's son. In her room, Isadora sat at the dressing table as Eleanor arranged her veil. Despite some lingering soreness from her struggle with Davis, She felt stronger than ever, her resolve to build a life with Sebastian unshaken. "Are you nervous?" Eleanor asked, securing the veil with pearl pins. Isadora smiled at her mother's reflection. "Not about marrying Sebastian, though I am a little anxious about tripping over my dress in front of all those people." Eleanor laughed. "You'll be fine. Just keep your eyes on Sebastian. Nothing else matters." A knock at the door announced the arrival of Lord Blackwood, who would be escorting Isadora down the aisle in place of her father. "It's time," he said, looking uncharacteristically emotional in his formal attire. "Sebastian is waiting." Isadora took a deep breath and stood, smoothing the ivory satin of her gown. "Then let's not keep him waiting any longer." The garden was filled with guests when Isadora emerged on Lord Blackwood's arm. Whispers rippled through the crowd at the sight of her, not the whispers of scandal and disapproval that had followed her for months, but murmurs of admiration and awe. Isadora heard none of it. Her eyes were fixed on Sebastian, standing beneath the canopy in his formal suit, looking at her as if she were the only person in the world. As she walked toward him, Isadora thought of the journey that had brought her to this moment. From a servant bound by debt to a woman who had fought for her freedom and her family's legacy, from keeping her eyes down to meeting the gaze of the man she loved as his equal. When she reached Sebastian, he took her hands in his eyes shining with love and pride. "You look beautiful," he whispered. "So do you," she whispered back, making him smile. The minister began the ceremony, his voice carrying across the hushed garden. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." As they exchanged their vows, Isadora felt a sense of completion, as if a circle that had been broken was finally made whole again. This was what her mother had fought for, what she herself had nearly died for, the right to choose her own path, to love and be loved freely. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister said at last. "You may kiss the bride." Sebastian lifted Isadora's veil and kissed her tenderly, to the applause of the gathered guests. As they turned to face their friends and family, Isadora caught sight of her mother, tears streaming down her face even as she smiled with joy. The reception that followed was a celebration unlike any Blackwood Manor had seen in years. Music filled the air, champagne flowed freely, and even the most skeptical guests seemed caught up in the happiness of the occasion. Sebastian and Isadora moved among their guests, accepting congratulations and well wishes. The scandal their tea had once surrounded them seemed forgotten, at least for this one perfect day. As evening fell, lanterns were lit throughout the garden, casting a magical glow over the festivities. Sebastian led Isadora to the center of the terrace for their first dance as husband and wife. "Happy?" he asked as they moved together to the music. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied, her eyes shining. From the edge of the garden, Eleanor watched her daughter with a heart full of pride. Lord Blackwood came to stand beside her, offering her a glass of champagne. "She looks radiant," he said, following her gaze. "You've done well with her, Eleanor." "We both have," she replied, accepting the glass. "Despite everything." Lord Blackwood's face grew serious. "I've been meaning to speak with you about that, about the past." Eleanor turned to look at him. "Richard, today is for the children. Let's not dwell on old grievy." "Hansis." "Not grievances," he said quickly. "Amends. I've had my lawyer draw up papers. The Wilson Blackwood Mining Company will be solely in Sebastian and Isadora's names. I'm stepping away entirely." "That's unexpected," Eleanor said, studying his face. "May I ask why?" Lord Blackwood looked out at the dancers, at his son and new daughter-in-law moving gracefully together. "Because I've caused enough damage. It's time to let the next generation build something better." He hesitated, then added, "And because I hope that someday you might find it in your heart to truly forgive me." Eleanor was silent for a long moment. "Forgiveness is a journey, Richard. I've taken the first steps. The rest will come with time." He nodded, accepting her answer. "That's more than I deserve." As the music ended, Sebastian and Isadora returned to join them, their faces flushed with happiness and dancing. "We have news," Seb Astian announced, his arm around Isadora's waist. "Sheriff Morgan just sent word. They've arrested Davis." "Where?" Lord Blackwood asked. At the train station in the next county, Isadora explained. He was trying to board a train to New York, but the sheriff had telegraphed ahead to have all stations watching for him. He'll stand trial for attempted murder, Sebastian added, and the sheriff found Clara's real journal in Davis's possession. It confirms everything. Their plot against our family, their plan to take control of the Wilson land. Eleanor squeezed her daughter's hand. So it's truly over. All except the happily ever after part, Sebastian said with a smile. We're still working on that. Isadora laughed, a sound of pure joy that seemed to light up the night. I think we're off to a good start. Later that night, as the last guests departed and the lanterns were extinguished one by one, Sebastian and Isadora stood alone in the garden, looking up at the stars. Mrs. Blackwood, Sebastian said, testing the name on his tongue. How does it feel? Isadora pretended to consider the question. Strange, wonderful, right. And tomorrow we move into our own home, he reminded her. The Wilson farm, or should I say, the Blackwood Wilson estate. Just home, Isadora said, leaning against his shoulder. That's all it needs to be. Sebastian tilted her face up to his and kissed her tenderly. As long as you're there, it will be. In the years that followed, the story of Sebastian and Isadora became something of a legend in the county. The tale of the servant girl who rose to become the mistress of one of the finest homes in the region, who helped build a mining empire, who overcame scandal and danger to find happiness. Some versions of the story emphasized the romance, the forbidden love between master and servant. Others focused on the drama, Clara's death, Davis's revenge, Isadora's narrow escape from drowning. Still others spoke of redemption, how Lord Blackwood had atoned for his sins, how Eleanor Wilson had found justice after years of wrongful imprisonment. But to those who knew them best, Sebastian and Isadora's story was simpler and more profound than any of these versions. It was about two people who saw each other clearly when the rest of the world was as blinded by prejudice and convention. It was about the courage to stand up for what was right, even when it was difficult. And most of all, it was about the power of love to heal old wounds and create new beginnings. Eleanor Wilson lived out her days in comfort, dividing her time between her own small cottage on the Blackwood Wilson estate and the main house, where she doted on her grandchildren. 3 boys and a girl, all with their mother's expressive ES and their father's kind heart. Lord Blackwood, true to his word, stepped away from business affairs, devoting his later years to philanthropy and gradually to rebuilding his relationship with Eleanor. They never remarried, but found a kind of friendship that, in time, healed many of the wounds of the past. The Wilson Blackwood Mining Company flourished under Sebastian and Isadora's leadership, becoming one of the most successful businesses in the region. They were known not just for their profits, but for their fair treatment of workers and their commitment to preserving the land they mined. Their home on the Wilson property became a gathering place for family and friends, filled with laughter and love. It was everything Isadora had dreamed of during those dark years as a servant, a place where she belonged, where she was valued, where she was free. And every night, when Sebastian looked into his wife's eyes, he saw what he had seen from the beginning: intelligence, courage, and a spirit that could not be broken. No longer the eyes of a slave girl, but the eyes of a woman who had fought for her happiness and won. As for Michael Davis, he was convicted of attempted murder and sentenced to 20 years in prison. The revelation of his plot with Clara, combined with his attack on Isadora, destroyed what remained of his reputation. By the time he was released, old and bitter, the world had moved on without him. Clara's story became a cautionary tale, a reminder of how ambition without morality leads to destruction. Few mourned her passing, but in time even she was forgiven, if not forgotten. And so, in the grand tradition of great love stories, Sebastian and Isadora did indeed live happily ever after, not without challenges or sorrows, for that is the nature of life, but with a deep and abiding love that carried them through the years, growing stronger with each passing day. Their story was passed down through generations, inspiring others to look beyond appearances, to stand up for justice, and to believe in the power of love to overcome all obstacles. For in the end, that is what mattered most, not wealth or status or the opinions of society, but the courage to meet another's gaze without fear or shame. to see and be seen for who you truly are. And in that seeing, to find home,